Welcome to this Whole Life Action Hour. I'm Ocean Robbins, your host, and today our focus is optimizing your health for peak performance. You deserve to do more than cope or mope or muddle through another day. Your body was meant to thrive. It was exquisitely designed to function beautifully, so you can give your unique gifts, so you can recover from illness and injury, and so you can live with vibrance and purpose. In this action hour, we are joined by world-renowned podcaster and fitness expert, Rich Roll. When he was 40 years old, Rich made the decision to overhaul the sedentary throes of overweight middle age and a struggle with alcohol addiction. He went on to become a globally recognized ultra-distance endurance athlete and a plant-based advocate for healthy living. Rich is a best-selling author and host of the wildly popular Rich Roll podcast, which is one of the world's most listened to podcasts with over 200 million downloads. He's been named one of the 25 fittest men in the world by Men's Fitness, and he is the best-selling author of Finding Ultra and The Plant Power Way. Rich, welcome.
Thank you, Ocean. It's really nice to spend an hour with you. I appreciate you taking the time, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion.
Well, thrilled to have you here. And now, before we go further, I do want to be very clear about one thing. Nothing you hear today is medical advice. This is coaching. We're sharing our best insights. But of course, always consult with a qualified healthcare professional about your specific medical issues and needs. That said, you're going to learn a lot today. This is a project of Whole Life Club, Food Revolution Network's membership community. This week, we've hosted action hours with Brenda Davis on Saturday, with Dr. William Lee on Monday, and today with Rich Roll. And Whole Life Club paid members get access to our entire library of action hours, including transcripts, and also the chance to submit questions for future ones in advance. They also get recipes and lots of other resources with one goal, which is to help sustain, implement, and optimize your healthy lifestyle for life. So at the end of this action hour, I'll tell you a little bit more about how you can join in Whole Life Club if you want to, with a special opportunity that expires tomorrow. But now I want to dive in with Rich. So let's just jump in here, Rich. I want to start with your epiphany, your transformational moment at age of 40. A lot of folks know at that point that you were overweight and struggling with a lot of issues, and you turned it around in a pretty dramatic way. Now, a lot of folks I know in their 40s have already kind of given up on life. They're saying you can't teach an old dog new tricks, the die is cast, but you clearly showed something very, very different is possible. And I'm just curious, you went from being, as you've said, having trouble climbing a flight of stairs to, completing a 3-day double Ironman triathlon, 6.2 miles swim, 260-mile bike ride, 52.5-mile run. What sparked your transformation?
Well, what sparked it was sort of the intersection of a health scare with a bit of an existential crisis that I was harboring. As you mentioned, I was on the precipice of turning 40 and was living my professional life as a corporate lawyer at the time. And although I had been an athlete in college, I was a swimmer. That was very much in the rearview window. And I was, definitely in the throes of workaholism, just living that basic standard kind of corporate lifestyle, riding elevators and wearing a suit to work and all of that. And although I had been sober for 9 years, I had transferred a lot of that addictive kind of natural tendency that I have into not just my work, but also unhealthy lifestyle habits. So by the time I was 39, I was about 50 pounds overweight, hadn't really been looking after myself physically with any kind of, conscious regard. And also was very dissatisfied in my career choice, but I'm somebody who just works hard and plows through, and I'm going to make this, I'm going to make myself happy doing this one way or the other, and just climb the corporate ladder with kind of tunnel vision. But I knew deep down inside me that I had chosen the wrong path for myself. And those kind of emotions were starting to percolate up, and they rose to the surface in a moment where, after a long day of work, I was just walking up the flight of stairs to my bedroom and had to pause. I was winded, out of breath. I had some tightness in my chest. Heart disease runs in my family. And it was a moment of clarity where I thought, I had been this world-class swimmer in college and still sort of thought of myself in that way. And here was a moment that really snapped that denial and made me realize, like, wow, I can't even like walk up a flight of stairs without being winded. Like, this is not who I am. And beyond that, like, it made me kind of really reckon with the fact that I was on the wrong path professionally for myself. So it was really this very specific moment that birthed a willingness to make a change. And I think I was able to grab onto that moment and channel that willingness because 9 years prior, I had had a similar analogous experience, a moment of clarity with my battle with alcoholism that had led me into a treatment center and ultimately sobriety. And so I understood implicitly the power of a simple decision and how that could really transform my life if I take it seriously. And because I had been previously visited with one of those moments, I knew that they held that kind of power. And I had this sense that I was once again being given that type of gift. And I think that allowed me to then hold on to that willingness and immediately translate it into action the following day and the day after that. So to your point about people feeling like at 40, their die is cast in terms of who they are and what's possible for them in life. I feel very differently for personal reasons. I think that we all are sitting on top of mountains of untapped potential. And that moment kind of, reconfigured how I live my life. And I'm still growing and learning. And through the podcast, I'm continuing to, pull back layers and discover aspects of who I am that need redress. And so it's really a lifelong commitment to just iterating on yourself. And I think if you inhabit that type of practice, you will soon discover that 40 is nothing. I'm now 55 and, I know there's so much more potential within me. And I think that that's something that we all share.
I'm reminded of something Michelangelo is said to have said about the statue David, which is, he said that David was always inside that block of granite and he just had to chisel away to reveal what was there. And I'm thinking as you're saying this, that in some way, each of us has an essence, who we really are on the inside. And sometimes life is about chiseling away all the riffraff and all the distractions so we can really discover who we are and embody that.
And isn't that what we're really here to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Most of our audience might never accomplish the kind of physical feats that you have, and many may struggle to consistently walk a mile. Are there any principles you've learned through ultra-endurance athletics that you think might transmit to every level of physical endeavor?
Yeah, sure. I mean, ultra-endurance just became my vehicle for personal growth. It was my modality. And it almost doesn't matter what I did in ultra-endurance sports because I think everybody has something that they can leverage for that growth curve within their own life. But I think the principles that I've extracted from it are really kind of fundamental to making any kind of change in your life.
Thank you. It seems to me that a lot of prominent athletes eat kind of whatever they want when they're young. But as the years go by, it seems like the folks who are able to continue to perform at a high level, I'm thinking about athletes like Tom Brady and Chris Paul, for example, they tend to pay more and more attention to their diet as the years go by and often move in a plant-based direction. Do you believe that for you personally, a plant-based diet has been helpful or even critical to your athletic performance, especially as you've aged?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been absolutely central and a key component in my success as an athlete and my ability to thrive past that. And I think it boils down to a couple key things. I think it's perhaps a bit too much of a stretch to just say eating a plant-based diet is like the ultimate, diet for an athlete. I think what's more accurate is to say that when you're eating plant foods close to their natural state and eating as exclusively plant-based as possible, you're tending towards a diet that is very nutrient rich, but isn't necessarily overly calorically rich, but packed with all the phytonutrients and micronutrients and all the things that we need to thrive as humans and as athletes. And in so doing, it tends to be a very, very high in antioxidants and very anti-inflammatory. So inflammation is a big deal. Obviously, I'm sure you've talked about this a lot, the relationship between inflammation and chronic disease. Yeah. But as an athlete, inflammation can be an impediment to recovery. And the more anti-inflammatory your diet and the more antioxidant rich your diet is, the faster your body is going to be able to repair itself in between your training sessions. So that will in turn and in time translate into performance gains that will exceed what you would be able to do in a certain set period of time. So it's not like an overnight thing, but over time, you'll be able to push yourself harder. You'll be able to recover more quickly. You're less likely to lose out on training sessions because you were sick or injured. And those become huge advantages. And I think the receptivity of athletes to the plant-based diet later in their careers is super interesting and also makes sense because yes, when you're young, you have this sense of being bulletproof. You're just eating as much food as possible and you can kind of get away with it when you're young. And as you start to age, you realize like, if I eat that thing, like I know I'm going to feel lousy. What should I be eating so that I feel good? I'm giving my body what it needs to repair itself and be strong. And also, you know, when you're in the kind of twilight of your career and, you know, it's your profession, this is how you're making a living, and you're looking to eke out maybe, you know, 1 or 2 more seasons or just extend the longevity of your ability to be at peak performance, then the receptivity to plant-based nutrition becomes very high. And you know, it's absolutely evident when you look at somebody like Tom Brady, that who's like the poster boy for, you know, unbelievable longevity in terms of maintaining that peak performance, that his nutrition is absolutely, you know, a key piece in that equation.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to ask you this. About a decade ago, you completed the Epic 5 challenge, where you and Jason Lester finished 5 Ironman distance triathlons on 5 different Hawaiian islands in under 1 week. Did you lose a lot of weight in that week? And what kind of foods do you think are the optimal fuel source for super stamina, stuff like this?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. So I thought that at the end of that 5 days that I would just be emaciated. And actually what happened was quite the opposite. By the time we completed that, I felt very bloated. And I think it's because the body is in such an exigent state. It's being challenged to such a degree calorically that in this crisis mode, it's like, I need to hold on to as many chestnuts as possible. So it was a very strange thing to feel kind of like bulky at the end of that. And then my coach predicted this, told me exactly that this would happen. And that's exactly what happened. About 10 days after the event was over and my body was kind of, you know, returning to some level of homeostasis and realized it was no longer in a crisis mode, all the weight, like immediately, almost overnight, evaporated, and I was suddenly very skinny. So that was a very strange experience. In terms of fueling for Epic 5, we had, you know, just a small skeleton crew of people helping us, and it was very much a, you know, putting band-aids on situations to just get through the day. So I would love to tell you that my diet was optimal throughout that experience, but a lot of times it was like, we need food now. Somebody go run and get us something. So we weren't eating at the highest level that I would have preferred, but tons of carbohydrates, lots of sweet potatoes, almond butter, high, you know, like calorically dense foods and foods that are high in calories were key for that. So yes, lots of potatoes. And then in terms of more starchy, simpler sugars, like plenty of dates, lots of fruit, watermelon, things like that.
Yeah, gotcha. And lots of water too. I'm sure.
Yeah, a lot of water, a lot of
light beverages, right?
Yeah, a lot of coconut water, a lot of coconut water, and avocado sandwiches.
Yeah, absolutely. So one time I ran a marathon in my 20s. I've run a couple in my life, but I made the mistake of, I was actually doing these like 3-mile loops, and I made the mistake. I thought I was really smart to set up this little station of a beverage, and it was grape juice. And I was so mad at myself because it tasted like syrup, like cough syrup by the end. Like I wanted something more watery than that. Anyway.
Yeah, this is the process. You have to experiment with all that kind of stuff. And then if you do it a number of years, a lot of the foods that you used to love that you use to fuel these adventures suddenly become completely unpalatable afterwards.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's not really a culinary experience.
Right.
So another question for you, kind of getting a little more granular with your regular diet. Like, a lot of people are fans of yours and impressed by your achievements and are curious, what do you actually eat on a day-to-day basis? Can you take us through what a typical day might look like for you on your menu?
Yeah, sure. Every day is a little bit different, and seasonally, it kind of depends on if I'm training for something and how intensive that training is, because during those periods, I'm going to be eating a lot more and perhaps adding in a meal. But in a typical day, I've been experimenting with intermittent fasting. So there's plenty of days throughout the week where I actually don't eat anything until lunchtime or late in the afternoon. And that meal would generally be a large salad and maybe a light soup. Like I try to eat relatively light throughout the day. If I am training harder or I'm feeling particularly run down or extra hungry, I like to start the day with a green smoothie. And that smoothie typically begins with dark leafy greens, like lots of kale and spinach, chard, and then celery, beets and beet greens. If I'm going out for a big training day, those are endurance boosting foods, very effective. Lots of berries, and then, a few superfood things like chia seeds, ground flax seeds, find their way into my smoothie. But I've got 6 people living in my house, 4 kids. So when I open up the fridge door, I'm never sure what I'm going to find in there. So it's not like a set thing. A lot of times it's just like, which produce hasn't gone bad yet? And, are those bananas okay? All right, I'll put them in the smoothie. So sometimes it's a potpourri, and that's typically, all I'll eat in the morning. If I'm extra hungry, maybe some toast with almond butter. But that'll get me, towards lunch. I'll go out and do my training. And then after training, I'll hydrate. And then again, it's a pretty light lunch situation, typically a salad. My bigger, and then, if I'm hungry, if in terms of snacks, it's usually fruit and nuts. So almonds or baru nuts or, chopped fruit, something like that. Like I like to keep it pretty light and digestible. And then the big meal is dinner. That's where I get, most of my calories for the day. I love Mexican food. I eat tons of beans. So lots of black beans, kidney beans, chickpeas, things like that. Tons of lentils, all high in protein. So great for athletes, etc. Lots of vegan burritos. My wife is an amazing cook. She's written these cookbooks. So dinner is usually, her specialty. So I eat what she makes and she makes it taste good. But of course, always 100% plant-based.
Yeah, fabulous. Thank you. And when you talk about dinner, I can't help but think about how, for me, dinner is the main meal that I put attention on, and then leftovers are the name of the game for me. So often lunch, sometimes breakfast, is leftovers from dinner.
Sure.
We have multiple courses at dinner, and then it all just gets repurposed in different ways in days to come. Yeah. Another question for you is, so I was a distance runner starting early in my life. My dad actually was my coach, and I started running 10Ks when I was 7 years old, and I ran my first marathon when I was 10. 105 laps around a quarter-mile track at my school. I kid you not. It was quite an experience. But for me, developing stamina and the ability to really stay with something for a long time honed a skill set that I feel like I've used in a lot of other places in my life since then. The ability to stay 100% present with something that's right in front of me, the ability to pace myself. These are the kind of skills that I now use in the midst of a long work day, or even when I'm preparing to cook a meal for my family. In your memoir, Running Ultra, you wrote that the only way out was through, one foot in front of the other. Turn the brain off, keep it simple, and just begin. And that was in reference to completing a marathon, but I think it might apply to other things too. So, so Rich, what I want to ask you is, in what ways have the skills you've developed as an ultra distance athlete been useful to you in other domains of your life?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, yes, the only way out is through, and it's back to that idea of the small things being the big things. What is the next step that you're taking? Endurance sports, like life, is about presence of mind and mindfulness. And what I've learned through my experiences as an athlete that have transferred into the rest of my life is that ability to be present through discomfort and to be focused, particularly, now in this age of distraction in which we live. Like, how can you see a project through? How can you commit to accomplishing a certain thing in a day and actually, stay true to your word and do that? And for me, it always goes back to bringing your whole person to whatever it is that you're doing. And that is a mindfulness practice that you can hone, that you have control over, that things like endurance sports or, marathon running teach you. Like, you have to stay with the discomfort. And the more that you develop the capacity to do that, the more you train yourself to understand that you can overcome this thing that seems overwhelming in the moment, to not freak out or allow your emotions to get the best of you, but to kind of disassociate from the part of your brain that's telling you to stop or that you should go do something else, and understand that your higher self has a better agenda for you, and to heed that voice instead.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. How do you know the difference between the voice that's saying, hey, you've got an injury, you better take care of yourself and stop, because obviously we can do harm when we don't listen to certain realities or sensations. But at the same time, there's another voice that's obviously just fear talk. I mean, for example, I sometimes like to take cold showers, and recently I turned on the cold and instantly my mind was thinking, there's a drought, don't waste water. Yeah. But I wasn't thinking that for the previous 5 minutes while I stood in a hot shower. But suddenly at that moment, I got very concerned about the drought, right? And other moments it's like, oh, you could get hypothermia. Well, there's no way you're going to get hypothermia from standing in a cold shower for 30 seconds. But those thoughts go off, right? And there's some part of the brain that is wired really, I think, for good purposes to protect us from harm, but it kicks in. So how do you know the difference between intelligent self-interest, like knowing your limits, knowing your boundaries, and like that kind of fear talk?
Yeah, well, first part of it is experience, right? In the context of being an athlete, understanding when you're just fatigued versus you have an injury that would require you to stop is something you just learn through the doing of it. But I think beyond that, it's about it's back to a mindfulness practice. Like, it's about developing the capacity to, excuse me, respond to events as opposed to react to them, right? I think a lot of us are live wires, and we're disconnected from who we are, and we're just reacting to stimuli without really considering what the best response is. And through the mindfulness practice, or the ability to bring presence to whatever it is you're doing, you're able to purchase just a slight buffer between stimulus and response, where you can inhabit the ability to consider what would be in your best interest, and to rebut, the chatter of the idle mind that's talking you out of something, and understand that that isn't exactly truth or in your best interest, and to then, act in accordance with, the proper trajectory for that outcome that you seek.
Yeah, thank you. I want to talk about supplementation for performance. We know a supplement really should exactly be that. It should supplement or enhance a well-balanced whole foods diet, not take the place of whole foods. But we also know that, and we know that a lot of supplements are isolated nutrients or a combination of nutrients that may fill in specific gaps or enhance certain aspects of health, but sometimes they also don't perform quite the way we would expect, because we see that somebody performs better when they have certain blood levels elevated, and we say, oh, we can elevate those blood levels with that supplement, but then we don't realize there's a whole host of cofactors, and the result going for is more complex. Mm-hmm. All that as context, though, are there some supplements that you think might benefit endurance athletes or people who are taking on big stamina kinds of events?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm a believer in responsible supplementation. And like yourself, I feel that all of your nutrients should be met through the foods that you're eating, because those nutrients are being delivered to you in a very complicated matrix that includes fiber and cofactors and all the like that enhance the bioavailability of those nutrients. And when you are taking exogenous supplements that are extracted from that food matrix, there is a bioavailability problem. Just because you're taking it doesn't mean that your body is necessarily absorbing them appropriately, nor putting them to use in the manner in which you might suspect. So caution is advised, and I'm certainly not a doctor. And I don't overdo it with supplements. You know, I do take some protein powder from time to time, but that's not how I'm meeting my protein needs. If I'm training super hard or feeling run down, a scoop of, plant-based pea powder or any of the, kind of different types of plant-based proteins that are out there is a fine thing to do, as long as you're not using it as an excuse to skip the lentils and the beans, et cetera. Beyond that, B12, anybody who's on a plant-based diet knows that they should be supplementing with B12. I supplement with vitamin D as well, and that's not a vegan thing. I think there are just millions and millions of people on all kinds of diets that are vitamin D deficient, and it's wise to, be on top of that. And in terms of athletic performance, there's a couple different supplements that I'll cycle through. The first is cordyceps, which is very powerful in its ability to enhance the body's ability to uptake and utilize oxygen, which as an endurance athlete is obviously very important. So that's one that I would take from time to time.
That's a mushroom.
Yeah.
Right?
It's now they can synthesize it in a lab, but the pure cordyceps it's basically a mycelium that lives in a symbiotic or what is it called when it actually kills the host? Not symbiotic.
Parasitic?
Parasitic relationship with a caterpillar that lives in high altitude in certain parts of China and Nepal. So it's very expensive, but now they figured out how to synthesize it in the lab. Obviously, the natural version of that is going to be more potent. But studies have shown that it actually is very effective in terms of athletic performance. A similar one I mentioned earlier is beets and beetroot. That's not a supplement, but it's kind of a food analog to what cordyceps accomplishes. If I'm doing strength training, I have experimented with creatine, because if you're not eating any meat, there's a good chance that perhaps your creatine levels are low in your blood. I don't overdo that though, and I can't tell you that I've noticed any kind of big change with that. And I have gone through phases where I had all kinds of supplements and tons of antioxidants and all types of jars and, in my cabinet when I was training for big races, and kind of was wondering, are any of these doing anything? And I just cleared my cabinet out, stopped using all of them. And my numbers didn't go down. So I think we can over index on that kind of thing. And there's probably a mental thing that happens. If you're taking all of those things, you think that you're bigger and faster and stronger than you actually are. But I try to keep that kind of stuff pretty simple. So, and then there's kind of a gray area between, things that would come in capsule form versus, foods that would be considered superfoods because they're a little bit exotic. Some people sort of categorize them as supplements, and those would be things like chia seeds, which are very good for endurance as well. And I don't know what else, like really high, kind of more exotic antioxidant stuff, moringa, things that I would put in my smoothie, powders that are extracted from some of the more exotic fruits.
How about turmeric? Is that good for?
Oh yeah, of course, turmeric. Yeah, fresh turmeric. Blend that in a smoothie with some oranges, or to kind of cut the flavor, because it's an acquired taste, that turmeric, but very effective and highly anti-inflammatory and exceptional in terms of recovering from a bout with some heavy training.
And turmeric's most bioavailable when you consume it with some black pepper and
That's
or
right.
some form of fat along with it. Even some
Mm-hmm.
avocado or what have you in your smoothie can help.
Yeah, cool.
Great. Thanks much. Good tips there. Another topic I want to talk about a little bit is sleep. We know that it's important for recovery, and it also plays an important role in brain function, metabolism, appetite, immune system health, and preventing chronic illnesses. But 1 in 3 Americans are chronically sleep deprived. We know that practices that can help with healthy sleep include regular exercise, avoiding sugar and alcohol before bedtime, avoiding caffeine, especially late in the day, making your sleep surroundings into a sanctuary, and creating a consistent routine so you can build up healthy circadian rhythms. And we've also got some studies showing that a higher fiber diet can be helpful for sleep, and that a diet high in saturated fat and in sugar is associated with lower quality sleep. So, Rich, I'm curious from your perspective. I've heard that you say your best sleep might be sleeping in a tent in your backyard.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think your sleep habits affect your recovery? And are there any foods or practices that you have found helpful to you?
Sleep is the most important thing in terms of recovery and anybody's ability to perform optimally, professionally, interpersonally. Like, we all know that experience of waking up in the morning when you haven't slept well and just almost sleepwalking through your day and just not really being able to be present, or the thoughts not coming very easily, and certainly lacking the energy to go work out or anything like that, versus the really solid 8 hours of sleep where you wake up and just feel superhuman, and you don't get stressed, and you're able to problem solve, and you can do your workout, and you're pleasant to the people that you're interacting with. I mean, it's, in my experience, it's night and day. And so I've learned to never compromise on sleep, to always prioritize it. And as I get older, and I think this is common, I'm 55 now, sleep becomes more elusive, and thus it becomes more incumbent upon me to take greater responsibility for my sleep hygiene. And all of this is borne out with science that is kind of locked in and now emerging. I would strongly advise anybody who's watching this to check out Dr. Matthew Walker's work. He's a professor at UC Berkeley. He's one of the world's leading sleep experts, and he wrote a book called Why We Sleep. If you read that book, it will completely revolutionize how you think about sleep and how important it is, particularly as we age. I've had the good fortune of having him on the podcast, and he's been instrumental in helping me conceptualize like the importance of all of this. So I take it very seriously. And this is somebody who, when I was a young person and a swimmer in high school, I would wake up at 4:45 every morning and train, and, like sleep, for anybody who's a striver, a type A personality, you fall into that delusion that sleep is optional, or you pride yourself on not needing very much sleep. But anybody who says they don't need 8 hours is deluding themselves. We all, as a human animal, require this. And it's really important that we get it. And the time away from work when you're sleeping will pay dividends in your ability to perform more effectively and efficiently throughout the day. So I've gone to great pains to create an environment that is conducive to optimal sleep for me, which includes, as you mentioned, for the last 3 years, I've been sleeping outside in a tent. And I do that because I tend to sleep more soundly, more deeply with the cold air. And I live in Los Angeles, so it's not like I live in New Hampshire or something like that. I can do this year round with a bunch of blankets. And I love it. It's very conducive to a deeper sleep state for me. I go to bed at 9 o'clock. There's obviously life intervenes, and sometimes I can't always get to bed right at 9 o'clock. I've got kids and obligations, et cetera. But to the extent that I can control my environment, I'm in bed at 9. And when I go to bed at 9, I don't need to set an alarm. I wake up naturally as the sun rises. And it's changed my life. It's been a huge bonus in my ability to think more clearly, to interact more positively with other people, and all of the, biological reasons, of course, particularly as you age, in terms of staving off dementia, to to kind of sidestepping a lot of chronic illnesses that are related to chronic sleep deprivation. It's a key crucial thing that I can't overemphasize or overstate the importance of.
Thank you. Yeah, Doctors Dean and Aisha Sherzai, who are amazing neurologists. We've interviewed them for past whole life action hours and multiple food revolution summits. And they really explained it in a way that landed for me that when we sleep, our brain is filing away all of our experiences from the day. And there's something that can only happen when certain systems turn off and certain other systems turn on in our sleep. And all that filing process essentially is where we're able to harvest so that we have those memories to draw upon later in life, and also digest and process experiences so we can kind of integrate them into our subconscious. But also it makes room so that the next day you've got more room to absorb new experiences and have new experiences. And if you don't get enough filing time, then essentially it's like your desk gets so cluttered, you can't see what's going on anymore and you can't do your work eventually.
Right. Yeah. And you could eat the most pristine diet and be very conscious about everything you put in your mouth. But if you're sleeping 4 hours a night, I mean, forget about it. Like, your priorities are upside down.
Yeah. Thank you. One of the biggest barriers a lot of folks have when they want to make big lifestyle changes, and especially adopting a whole foods plant-based diet, is that it's hard to change deep habits. We live in a toxic food culture all around us. Eating highly processed junk foods and animal products is normalized and even subsidized. And we've also grown up, we tend to be creatures of habit. We learn to talk by listening to our parents talk. We develop ways of doing things. And quite frankly, a lot of our thoughts and most of our neuro patterns are recycled. You know, they're familiar patterns that just repeat. So changing those patterns can be hard for a lot of people. Rich, you made a radical change about 15 years ago. What advice would you give to somebody who's just getting started on a healthy lifestyle or plant-based journey to make it stick?
Yeah, I think it's really dependent upon what kind of personality type you are. Like in my case, you know, my pendulum swings far and wide. Like, I'm prone to extremes, and I respond well to, like, I'm going to draw this line in the sand and never step back. And like, I'm going to go from 0 to 100. And that's just how I'm wired. And that's what gets me excited. And that's the kind of challenge that I can, sort of wrap my head around. And I realize that most people aren't like that and are probably healthier as a result of that. So the way I like to think about it is, first, to kind of hearken the work of Dan Buettner in the Blue Zones, when he studied these cultures of centenarians, places where people live the longest and tend to be the happiest. What he extracted a lot of knowledge from those, looking at those communities. But one of the main things was that their healthy habits were a result of an environment that was conducive to the healthy habits, right? So what I'm saying, or what I mean by that, is to create an environment in your home to the extent that you can, and an environment in your workplace, if it's at all possible, that is conducive to the healthy choice. So, you know, removing all of those toxic foods and, processed foods, et cetera, from your cupboards and from your fridge. So if late at night, when you have that hankering, it's just not available, the only thing that you have is the healthy thing. And that will, help inoculate you from making the wrong choice, and put you on a path towards, doing the reps to make that healthy habit more habitual. So that's one thing, like, control your environment. And then the second thing is, just master one thing at a time. Like, try to forget about how overwhelming it is, or to future cast, like, oh my goodness, I got to go to this wedding. My whole family is going to be there. It's in 6 months and they're going to be serving, salmon and pork. And how am I ever going to get through that experience? Well, that hasn't happened yet. All you have to do today is figure out what you're going to eat before your head hits the pillow, and just make it manageable. Like, drill down to, what those tiny, again, it's back to the small things are the big things. Like, what's your next meal? What's the next choice? When your arm reaches out and you feel hungry, like, what's going to end up in your mouth? And when you kind of be present with it in that regard, I think it's easier to make these choices. It's very similar to to substance addiction recovery, like not thinking about like, oh my God, I'm not gonna be able to drink the rest of my life. Like, no, just, can you not take a drink today? Like, oh yeah, well, I can do that. And then it seems a lot easier. And similar to that is just like, look at one thing, like maybe like all you can handle right now is not putting half and half in your morning coffee or tea and opting for almond milk or oat milk or soy milk or what have you. And then mastering that, do that for 30 days or 90 days. And what you'll discover is after that period of time, you don't even think about it anymore. Like it's ingrained into you. You don't miss the way it used to be. You have, really solidified this new habit and then turn to the next thing. And you can kind of knock those, bowling pins over one by one. And that makes it very digestible. And then the final thing I'll say is to be patient on yourself. I mean, we read these narratives on the internet, like, overnight, I changed my diet and I've been perfect ever since. And it's just like, we're human beings, we're fallible, we make mistakes, we're prone to all of these complex emotions. So if you commit to making this switch in your lifestyle and then mess up one night because you had a fight with your partner and you just had to have that Haagen-Dazs and, in a moment of weakness, a lot of people then just throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, this is too hard. And they just go back to their terrible lifestyle habits. Just use that as an opportunity to better understand why you made that not so great choice. Well, I guess when I'm in emotional distress, suddenly like I crave these foods and I'm trying to medicate that emotional state through what I'm eating. Isn't that interesting? How can I create a situation where next time I'm in that situation, I don't opt for that unhealthy choice? And don't look at these things like failures, but just, self-knowledge, right? And make it fun and don't put so much pressure on yourself. Like, I think, that adherence to perfection takes more people off the playing field than it does, inspire them to a lifelong journey of gradual and inelegant self-improvement.
Yeah, that's pretty profound. And I even want to add one other layer, which is that the real human needs that are sometimes met through, binge eating or stress eating are real. Dr. Ornish talks about, I've got people saying, I've got 20 friends inside this pack of cigarettes, and they will all be there for me to make me feel better when I need them, and that feeling of security that people can get from, and of course, that's not the kind of friend we really want, because in the long run, those cigarettes are going to give us emphysema. They're going to make us feel addicted. They're going to make us feel like crap. But in the short run, there's a payoff there. And you're not wrong or bad for wanting that. You're not wrong or bad for seeking comfort from foods that you grew up thinking made you feel better. And we've celebrated, from the time babies are born, we're celebrating holidays, birthdays with sugars and sweets and unhealthy foods. And comfort foods are so often junk foods. So learning how to take real comfort from foods that truly comfort our highest well-being is a journey, and it takes time. But one of the critical things to remember is that when you want comfort, when you want love, when you want pleasure, when you want reassurance, there are other ways to accomplish that. And the best time to repair a roof is when the sun's shining, not when it's pouring rain. So the best time to change a habit isn't when you're in the midst of distress and suffering. The best time to change a habit is when you have a little peace of mind, a little space, a little clarity to stock the fridge with healthy foods, to get rid of the unhealthy stuff, to create the conditions so that when you're in stress, you've got some allies there to help you pull out by eating things that actually are good for you, rather than creating some temporary pleasure and then ensconcing you in cycles of more suffering down the road.
Very well said.
Rich, you've interviewed a lot of amazing people. Your podcast has over 200 million views. You must have had some pretty fascinating aha moments along the way. Can you think of any ideas or insights or messages you've heard from your guests over the years that have especially moved you or rocked your world?
Yeah, it's a question I get quite often, and it's always hard to answer because it all kind of just, it's in this soup in my head, and it all informs, me on some level, and makes me a better person. It's a true gift to be able to sit down with so many amazing minds and learn from them and be inspired for them. one is the one that I already mentioned, Matthew Walker, and his thoughts on sleep. It's just completely changed how I look at something that I always took for granted, but never really gave it the due or attention that it deserved. I think that a lot of the emerging science around longevity is super interesting right now, and I think it's early days. I'm reticent to draw too many conclusions from what's happening at the moment, but I think it's fascinating that there are people looking at how we can extend human life, and the philosophical implications for the planet if we're capable of doing that. I think it's super interesting. But I would say, overall, the theme, I talk to all different kinds of people of varying, degrees of expertise in one field or the other. But if there is a general theme, it's this notion of transformation, this idea that within all of us, as I mentioned earlier, we have this potential energy, this capacity to unlock areas of potential that exist within us in an unconscious way. And we do that through various modalities, through athletics, through the arts and culture, through overcoming obstacles and hardships that we all face. Like, nobody gets out of life alive. We all face difficult things. I don't care how fancy your life is or how famous you are. Everybody, if you sit them down and have a candid conversation with them, people have their traumas and their turmoils, and there's something beautifully connective about that we're having this shared experience and that we can learn from each other. And I think learning how people navigate those obstacles and the tools that they've extracted about how they problem solve in their life and kind of get over whatever it is that's holding them back to achieve a level of deeper self-integration, self-actualization, and then share that with the world. I find I derive great inspiration from that. And what I kind of extract most generally is this idea that I alluded to earlier, which is that we're here to grow. Like, we're here to experience life. We're here to, learn about who we are, unlock what is uniquely within ourselves, and share with the world what we learn along the way. And right now, in this era of distraction and lack of nuance, we need more of that. We need everybody to be fully who they are and to express that to the greatest degree that they're capable of doing that. And I think when you can inhabit that space, the planet is a better place.
You just used the phrase lack of nuance, and I want to go a little bit deeper with that. It seems to me that we live in a mass culture right now, a cultural moment when levels of division and separation are tearing at the fabric of so much that we love in our society. The basic sense of goodwill and dignity and respect for differences is sometimes eroded by all of the echo chambers and all of the fundamentalism and all of the political and even dietary wars that we see unfolding. And social media, which we thought would be this sort of town square that would bring us all together, but so often it just becomes this echo chamber where the person who is the most pithy at putting down somebody else gets a lot of likes, and we just circulate with people who think like us. And even Google favors search results that put people in the echo chamber of what they already think. People like to have their existing biases reconfirmed more than they tend to like being challenged. But at the end of the day, what's lost in all of that is so much of the fabric of wisdom and diversity of viewpoints upon which I think a democracy depends. I'm curious, Rich, from your perspective, and we see this in the food space too, of course, where it's like the diet wars of whose diet's right and all these other people are wrong and bad. And, what do you think is the antidote to some of the separation that we're seeing so endemic today?
Compassion, empathy, and understanding. And I think the vehicle for that is conversation. And it's why I feel so strongly about podcasting and this format that I love, which is long form discourse, because it is in diametric opposition to what you see on Twitter, where you're limited in the number of characters that you can express, and yes, rewarded for the hot take. But if you sit down with somebody for 2 to 3 hours, particularly if they are of a different mind than you, and you can find some common ground, or you can communicate with that person who sees things differently than you with a modicum of compassion and a good faith attempt to understand their perspective and the unique experiences that they've had over the course of their life. I think this is, a healing ailment to, what is really tearing at the fabric of our democracy and our utter humanity, quite frankly. And I think it's hardwired into us. It's like it's part of that campfire experience from which we come, but from which we have traveled far from. Inside of us, like, we crave it. People would say to me early on when I started the podcast, like, you're going 2 hours, 3 hours, like, nobody's going to listen to that. You've got to make them 30 minutes. But the fact that it has succeeded tells me that people are tired of shouting bobbleheads on the nightly news and the Twitter hot take. And what they really want is to feel the level of connection that you can only get through the nuance that takes place when you sit with somebody over an extended period of time and they share openly and honestly in a safe space with a degree of vulnerability that breeds like a level of trust and compassion. And I think in this era where everybody we're sort of driven towards bifurcation and really, non-nuanced perspectives on everything, it's important to understand that every man or woman is right from their perspective.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I'm always reminding myself of that. Like, in their mind, they're totally right, and I'm the crazy person, or vice versa. And so to approach those people with curiosity as opposed to judgment and a good faith, attempt to understand, I think, is really curative in this situation.
Yeah. And, the same is going to go with food. Like, there is no one size fits all perfect diet for everybody. You are the only you on the planet. And just because thousands of studies published in peer-reviewed journals say that most people, most of the time, are best with this particular food or not that particular food, or have lower risk of cancer with this particular way of eating, it doesn't mean that's true for all people all the time. It doesn't mean it's true for you all the time. So learning to listen to your own body, your own life experience, your own rhythms and stages is so important. And even what's best for you at one stage of life may change at a later stage of life. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the principles that I think is so important. And at Food Revolution Network, we really try to peel away from the dogmas and the shoulds. I try to never use the word should for the most part in my vocabulary, because I'm much more interested in not robbing anybody of agency and authorship of their lives. At the same time, if a study says that a whole lot of people did better eating a certain way, I want to know that, and I want to share that, because the odds are that's going to be beneficial, right? And so data is critically important, but it doesn't replace lived experience. Do you see it similarly, Rich?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know how to say it any better than you just said it. It's so eloquently and beautifully.
Thank you. Well, we're about to transition here in a moment, so I can tell everyone here more about Whole Life Club, Food Revolution Network's ongoing membership community. And the goal of this community is really to help folks optimize and sustain and deepen your healthy lifestyle for life. The doors only open to the public twice a year. And right now, until tomorrow, is the last chance in 2022. So please stay on if you want to learn more about this incredible opportunity. But before I do that, I just want to take a moment to say goodbye to Rich and say, Rich, thank you so much for your wisdom, for your integrity, for your example, for your brilliance, for your work, and for being with us today. It's been an incredible honor to share this time with you.
I appreciate that, Ocean. You're a beautiful steward of humanity and higher consciousness, and it was a privilege to be able to talk to you today. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. So we'll say goodbye to Rich now and make our transition. Stay on if you want to learn more about Whole Life Club and how you can take action to get these kind of results in your life. If you're already a member, there is no need to keep watching because you already know how awesome it is. But if you're not yet, please stay with us because this is an incredible opportunity right now. My dad and colleague, John Robbins, and I started Whole Life Club because we got so tired of seeing so many people get fired up and passionate and say, oh my gosh, I want to live in a new way. I want to take advantage of the benefits of a whole foods, plant-based life and all of the lifestyle innovations that can help me thrive. And I don't know how to get going, and I don't know how to stay with it because our culture pulls us back in so many ways to a status quo that can be toxic, that drags us down. And we want to help you have a wind at your back, to help you have consistent, steady support so you can keep making progress towards your highest well-being and your ultimate health goals. So our goal with Whole Life Club is to make it simple and easy so you can have clarity and turn it into action. Every month in Whole Life Club, we have a theme. It's kind of like a mini course that month. And some of our past themes have been on topics like brain health, heart health, anti-cancer living, blood sugar balance, boosting your energy levels, peak performance, getting your nutrients right. And every month within that theme, we've got some specific resources, an interview with a guest expert where members can ask their specific questions as well, plus recipes, action checklists for simple steps you can take, and a weekly action video that I deliver. It's about 3 minutes long with a simple step you can take to keep making progress. And when you join, you also get our entire library of over 500 recipes, dozens and dozens of action hours with guest experts, and lots of other resources, completely yours on demand. So you can dive deep into any of our past topics and get instant support. We conducted a survey a little while back of our Whole Life Club members, and we asked them, how's it going? And what's the impact been for you? Now, to be clear, this is what they said to us, but that doesn't mean it's what'll happen to you because, take all surveys with a grain of salt. But what we heard from so many people was that they were losing weight, they were gaining more energy, they were feeling more confident about their ability to make healthy choices. They were getting off of medications they no longer needed. They were feeling more confident in social dynamics, less lonely, better able to navigate family systems without falling off the wagon. And it was really powerful to hear these stories because a lot of folks also said they had hope and they had grounded hope. They were feeling better and they had a pathway towards feeling better and better and better instead of worse and worse and worse. So if you can relate to wanting more energy, better sleep, more ease in making the optimal choices for yourself and your family, then now's the time. We're holding a series of action hours this week, as you know, Saturday with Brenda Davis, Monday with Dr. William Lee, and now today. And a whole new raft of people are joining in Whole Life Club right now. So we opened the doors for an incredible offer this week only. And this is that moment. Right now, you can join for just $1 for the first month. And then if you stay on, $99 a year thereafter. And that's a price that's locked in. So your rates will not go up even when we raise the rates for the club in general in the future. This offer expires tomorrow. So this is your chance right now for huge savings to be locked in for life. And this dollar really might be the best dollar you ever spend. Recently, I got to chat with one of our members, Genevieve from Ontario, Canada. She said she'd like to share how a whole foods plant-based diet and the other changes that she has made with support from Whole Life Club have impacted her life. So now let's go ahead and roll the video. I want you to hear what it means to Genevieve. Here we go.
I'm Genevieve. I'm Genevieve in English. My friends call me Jen. I'm from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada.
And where were you in your life? Like, what were the challenges you were facing before you joined Whole Life Club and found connected with this body of work?
So before joining Whole Life Club, about maybe a year before that, my health was bad. My whole everything wasn't good. When I was 16, I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism. And back in the late 90s, that was really rare. So I've been on this path to try to kind of get that resolved. And I saw a documentary on veganism and how the industry, how it's factory farming, which got me straight into veganism. Like I've been a vegan for 2 years now. And I struggled to fit in with the crowds. I struggled to find meals. I struggled I was alone. I felt really alone. So when I saw the Food Revolution Summit, I was like, hey, people like me. And I was like, it's great. So I listened enthusiastically, and then that brought in more people, and that linked me to other documentaries and all that stuff. And then I grew my knowledge. And then the whole Life Club came about. And I was like, this is great. This is like-minded people who are supporting each other, whether they have taken that path to health or they're looking to be on that path. So what I like about that is that there's a combination of the two. People who can offer support and offer tips, but also people who are new that I can offer tips and support too, that I've been there and this is what I do. Maybe this will work for you. And of course, I absolutely enjoy your videos, your weekly videos. They're my pep talks to keep me on that path. And to go back to your original question, my hypothyroidism, all the symptoms that I've had have gone away. Like, I've reversed my hypothyroidism with the whole bucket list that comes along with that title. In 2 years, I'm down to a quarter of the medication I used to take that I took for like 18 years. So that's why I love being part of this club, because I know firsthand that when you change your diet, you change everything. All the ailments that you have, they go away.
Wow. Thank you. That's wonderful. Yeah. So give me a snapshot of how your life is different with those symptoms gone. Give me an example of some of the symptoms you were facing and how it's changed now.
My biggest notice, it's really funny, but it's hair. Like my hair was so thin, so dry, so brittle. Now I can grow long hair. I can be proud of my hair and not tie it back all the time. My nails, I couldn't grow nails for the life of me. And now I have to trim them every 2 weeks because they're so strong and so long that I'm scratching my daughter, and it's little subtle things like that you don't notice. And you're like, well, okay, I have hypothyroidism. I can't grow nails. My hair falls out. I'm constantly tired. Brain fog. Brain fog has to be the biggest one. It creeps up on you and you just learn to live with it. And you wake up one day and it's gone and you're like, wow, I feel smarter, but you're not smarter. You're just not bombarded by all these chemicals that are disrupting your brain's normal way of functioning. So that helps me be a better mom. I'm more focused at work. I get better sleep, which cycles into having more energy. And it all starts with good food. If you join Whole Life Club, you will get the support that you need to be on the path to take control of your health.
Well, thank you so much to Genevieve for sharing those inspiring words. We hear stories like this at Food Revolution Network almost every day, and sometimes it brings me to tears. I can't tell you what it means to be able to make such a difference in so many people's lives. And now I want to say this to you. If you're feeling inspired and you may want to implement what you're learning, if you're feeling touched or moved or galvanized, or like there's something here that you want more of in your life, then this is an opportunity right now for you to step forward. The doors are open for a very special opportunity until tomorrow only to join Whole Life Club and make it happen in your life. It's been an incredible week, and I'm so thrilled to be here and to be sharing all this with you. And if you're moved to take the next step with us, I'd be thrilled to welcome you in Whole Life Club. Whatever you decide, I hope you enjoy delicious, healthy food, maybe some good exercise, and lots of love, because you deserve it. Let's do this. When it comes to cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, heart disease, and other chronic illness, what really matters isn't how many books you read, how many webinars you attend, or how much you know. What really matters at the end of the day is what you eat and how you live. The science has given us what we need to know. Now it's time for action. It's time to implement and optimize your healthy lifestyle. It's time to get results. It's time to say goodbye to confusion and hello to clarity. It's time to say goodbye to bad habits and hello to good ones. It's time to fall in love with foods that love you back. It's time to join a community that will support you in achieving your goals. It's time for Whole Life Club. Click the link to find out more and to join in now.